Hey everyone, Joe here. Before we begin the last episode of Season 1, I want to take a moment to express my heartfelt gratitude for taking the time to tune in. Your support and engagement has meant the world to me. As we wrap up this first season, I'm curious, did it resonate with you? Did you find value in our discussions? I want to hear it all, the good, the bad, and everything in between. Your insights are invaluable in shaping the future of this podcast. So let's dive into 4 specific areas and prompts I'd love for you to reflect on. Number 1, what did you absolutely love about the show? What elements made you tune in week after week? Was it the in-depth analysis, the casual conversations, or maybe the practical tips? Was it a particular segment, the way we structured the content, or maybe just the overall vibe? Knowing what you enjoyed will help ensure I keep those aspects front and center moving forward. Number 2, what didn't you like about the show? What's one thing I can do to make the show better? It could be anything, from the format to the content, the audio quality, my hosting style, or anything else. No suggestion is too big or too small. Number 3, I'm dying to know, what was your favorite episode and why? Was it a certain topic that captivated you, a particular guest that left you inspired, or perhaps a specific segment that struck a chord? Lastly, number 4, if you feel it's worth going for a second season, send me your suggestions for guests I absolutely must have on the show. People you can think of that have very clear things that make their eyes light up. You can share your thoughts by dropping me an email at teatimejoepodcast@gmail.com or send me a DM on our Tea Time with Joe Instagram account. I'll include links to both of these in the show notes. Once again, thank you for taking the time to listen, and I can't wait to hear from you. Now, on to the last episode of this season with Sue Thompson. Hello and welcome to Tea Time with Joe. My guest today is Sue Thompson. Sue worked in healthcare for over 45 years and began in clinical nursing with areas of emphasis in performance improvement, patient and consumer experience, leadership mentoring, and healthcare policy. She served as CEO of UnityPoint Health Fort Dodge, Trinity Regional Medical Center, and interim CEO of UnityPoint Health. She was appointed by the U.S. Government Accountability Office as a commissioner to MedPAC, Medicare Payment Advisory Commission, which is an independent federal agency that advises Congress on policy related to the Medicare program, serving from 2015 to 2021. Sue is now retired and lives in Western Iowa, enjoying the time spent with her husband Dave, her 2 kids, and her first granddaughter, Ingrid Grace. Sue, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
I want to start with how we met and how our connection was significant in regards to this podcast. So, several years ago, I was an administrative intern at UnityPoint Health, and part of that summer, one of the great experiences was I got to go to West Des Moines, where the headquarters is located, and got to rotate through meeting different executives. And one of the executives I met was Sue, along with Dr. Dave, and there were a couple of other interns with me, and we got to share some of our stories real briefly. But what stands out is, even from my brief introduction and story that I shared with you, you immediately recommended the book, The Art of Possibility by Benjamin Zander. And one, I was amazed by how quickly you made that connection as a recommendation for me, just on the limited time that we had together. But 2, how spot on you were with that, because The Art of Possibility remains one of my favorite books.
Thank you.
And that book planted seeds of inspiration for this show because the author, Benjamin Zander, is the one who talked about Shining Eyes, which I talked about in the intro episode, and what I'm trying to capture in conversations. I know you wanted to discuss another concept from the book called Give Them an A. So why don't we start with, can you explain to our listeners what Give Them an A is?
Yeah, well, thank you. It's great to be here. It's so good to, I was just so delighted when you got a hold of me and offered this opportunity to just reconnect again.
Yeah.
And so thank you for that.
Of course.
Ben Zander and The Art of Possibility, I share with you. It's one of my favorite books. And there's just some terrific, not only leadership concepts, those are life concepts. Those are parenting concepts. Those are, whether you're doing volunteer work, and inspiring a group of people concepts. So I love them. And to give them an A is probably resonated with me because I always believed, and I continue to believe, that children will be what you tell them they can be. And I don't mean in a prescriptive way, but if you remind them that they are wonderful and they are beautiful and they are unique and they have talent, they will live into that. I just firmly believe that. I don't remember being taught that specifically, like having a conversation like this, but I can look back at particularly my grandmother, who played a really important role in raising me because my father was a farmer and my mother was busy with my younger sister. So my grandmother, who my grandfather and father farmed together, so my grandma ended up being primarily my most significant maternal influence, in addition to my own mother. But she very much told me at a very young age that, first of all, I was tall, which for girls can be difficult, but she told me that was my most valuable gift, to be tall and to embrace it. And the reasons it would be good to be tall was that I could always look people in the eye, and so she instilled in me that tall is good, tall is fine.
Wow.
She went to college. She was a school teacher, so education was very important. She was very, very, very much a student of the Bible. So she taught me that it was important to spend time in Bible study. Her dining room table was always covered, not only with her Bibles, various versions, but all the study books that went with it, because she was always working on her lesson for Bible study. So the role modeling she did with me, in addition, she took me to the Young Republicans. She was a Republican, so she would take me to the Young Republican meeting. And just different things that she worked to instill were all very positive messages about being involved, be a volunteer. She was on the hospital auxiliary, give back, were very much messages of giving me an A. And so when I read that chapter by Ben Zander, and I thought, people, and whether you're raising children or you're inspiring a workforce during COVID, they need to know they've got it in them. They do. It's in there. They just need to get connected to it. And it's the best when you see that happen.
Yeah. So. Outstanding. That framing, what stands out, I'm floored by that story of her reframing tall for you. Because you can't change tall, but she absolutely changed how you thought about it and how to use it as a strength.
Yes.
So I'm thinking, if you heard that and the thinking process of reframing such a thing that you first thought as, this is something that's going to inhibit me, this is an unwanted trait, no one's going to like me because of this, and turned it into, this is actually...
Oh, this is such an advantage for you. Yes. Yeah.
That's incredible. I also share with you that I was raised by my grandmother as well.
Yeah.
My parents came from South Korea, and they didn't know each other in Korea. They got set up on a blind date, immigrated to Chicago. A friend set them up.
In Chicago?
In Chicago.
Wow, okay.
So they didn't know each other back in Korea. They go on 2 dates and then decided, let's get married. And they've been married for over 30 years.
Wow.
They're hardworking immigrant parents, as what you might think. And so they were out working 12-hour days. I have an older brother. And grandma was the one that was in the house. Growing up, she was the one that raised us. And she was an excellent role model, like you were saying. While my parents, like your parents, were hard at work, trying to provide for the family. And what an advantage that is.
Oh.
And I want to acknowledge that and be grateful for that, because not everyone has that. But it is such an imprinting that young of an age to have someone with such a wisdom and can reframe for you how to think about these traits that you don't like.
Absolutely. Exactly.
Have you experienced giving an A to your children and how that has taken form.
You know, a couple things come to mind. I mentioned to you, Kate was just named to the Hall of Fame at Wartburg College. And she, you know, of course, when the homecoming parade in the morning, and she rides on the float with the 7 other Hall of Fame recipients for homecoming, and then halftime of the football game. And Dave and I my husband and I went along to watch Ingrid, because she wanted to have Ingrid there, which, great. And then in the evening was the dinner when they actually, you know, do the awards, and she did her acceptance speech. And she, you know, she's Kate's a very thoughtful, intellectual. I mean, she would love this conversation. I mean, this is her jam.
Really?
Oh, yeah. But she...
You have her on.
She did her acceptance speech in a message to Ingrid. And she thanked the coach, and she thanked her team and all that kind of stuff. But then she said, my message this evening is to my daughter. And she said, Ingrid, I hope you play golf. And I don't want you to play golf because I need you to be a great athlete. I want you to play golf because golf's hard. And golf will teach you so many things about yourself. It'll teach you patience, it'll teach you determination, it'll teach you resilience. And she said, and secondly, I hope you find your Wartburg College. I hope you find the place that teaches you are not your career, you're not the successes in life, but that your meaning comes from being a child of God. And you know, there is nothing, I could wish for no more than to know my children have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. That is just, put me down, I'm done. I mean, that's arriving as a parent. And to know, yeah, she has that faith and that comfort, and yeah, and she carries that, you know, one of her greatest challenges in the practice of psychiatry is not always knowing or feeling comfortable sharing her faith with a patient, you know, and needing to know the boundary there, needing to know the edge, but yet sometimes knowing, oh, you know, you don't need more medications. You know, therapy's probably good, but you just need faith. And so I listen to her talk about that, and that's the A. I mean, you know, along the way,
yeah,
she grabbed it.
I can't imagine how hard that would be, sitting with a patient, knowing in your heart of hearts that you have the answer, this healing answer of a Savior.
Exactly.
But having barriers,
you
know, legitimate barriers, of course.
Absolutely,
of
absolutely.
why you can or cannot say that. That would be, there would be so much internal tension and conflict. I can't imagine thinking through that each time, and maybe how burnt out you would be. Just, I have the answer and I want to share this and I want to help through this message of the gospel.
Yeah.
But I just can't because of X, Y, Z. Would she start her own practice?
Well, she works for the Berry Health Center in Fort Dodge. She's the medical director at the Community Mental Health Center in Fort Dodge. She practices out of her own home through telemedicine.
Nice.
She goes up to Fort Dodge, you know, for meetings on occasion, but otherwise, she really loves what she does. Yeah. It's a real calling for her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
I have another Give 'em an A story though with our son Nathan.
Yes.
And this one I have told many, many times. In fact, I maybe told you this story before because it's a story I frequently tell. But Nate was he was our firstborn. School always came easy for Nate. He was good in math, he was good in science, he did the calculus, he did the physics, he was good. And so of course, every young man who grows up in the home of an Iowa State graduate father is going to be an engineer at Iowa State. I mean, what else would you do but be an engineer at Iowa State? So he grew up a little Cyclone fan, and off to Iowa State he went as a materials engineering major. And he had a chemical engineering roommate. And the two of them, great friends to today. But, you know, and he'd call home and I said, well, how did that test go? How did that test go? And he'd say, oh, I did okay. And he came home at semester. He wasn't really happy. And yet I said, well, so where'd you land with your first set of finals? Well, he'd gotten an A in this and a B plus in that. And I think he ended up with a 3.6 at the end of his first semester in engineering at Iowa State. I said, well, Nate, that's great. Yeah. So one night we're sitting and we're talking. I could tell he was just really troubled. And he said, Mom, I don't think I'm in the right place. I said, really? I said, you don't think you're I don't know Iowa State. I'm fine at Iowa State, but I don't think I'm in the right college. I said, well, tell me more about that. And he goes, well, he said, most of the people I'm in class with, they don't talk. And I'm like more of I talk to people. I said, well, so where do you think you should be? He said, well, I think I need to do what you do. And I said, well, what do you think I do? And he goes, well, I don't know, but you like what you do. And I know you spend a lot of time with people. And most of the stories you tell, you're pretty upbeat about. So I think I need to do what you're doing. I mean, here this kid is, he's probably 18, 19 years old. Yeah. And I said, well, then you probably need to be in the business school. And he goes, I think so. So by golly, he went back in January and he trotted over to the business school and he transferred and he made up his whatever he didn't get done the first semester and to make up because he was in all that science. So he got over and transferred to business and finished his finance and accounting degrees at Iowa State and went down to the University of Iowa and did his business transaction with the Hawkeyes, as he puts it, and did his MHA and MBA there. So yeah, just to figure out in that period, because I've looked at so many young ones who they just don't know who they want to be or what they're good at or where their gifts are. And yeah, for him to have figured that out and to say, I think I want to do whatever you're doing. So yeah.
Incredible.
I know.
Wow. Wow. Before we go on further, I actually do want to go back in time because you mentioned your grandmother and the influence that she had. I'm going to ask this question a little bit differently. I want you to imagine we're watching a documentary of your life and we're going to zoom into a moment in time at the dinner table. You can choose what age, but something that feels significant to you or really captures your childhood. Can you describe to us what the scene looks like? Who's there? How old are you? What are you discussing?
Well, the dinner table would have been supper table because the evening meal on the farm was called supper.
Excuse me.
Although it was a substantial meal and we sat together as a family every evening. And this would go until age, well into high school. And then probably in high school when I got busier with extracurricular activities, I wasn't home every evening, but there was dinner, supper on the table every evening.
Yeah.
And
who's sitting?
And so my mom, my dad, and my sister and I.
Okay.
I have one sibling.
Okay. Older or younger?
She's 4 years younger. And as I've said, my father was a farmer. And my mother was, the very traditional maternal support to the farmer, doing the cooking and the baking and taking the lunches to the field. And she was, I'm very much an active member of that partnership. She would have prepared, there would have been either a round steak or a roast or there would be a potato dish, probably fried potatoes. It was more of a supper meal. By today's standards, it would still be substantial, but at noon was dinner on the farm, and that's where the big meal was served, which would be the roast, and then you might have leftover roast for supper. But always my dad would be asking, of course, about our day. And two things come to mind of what we would have talked about. One, he was a big current events guy. He read the Des Moines Register from front to back. It was delivered to our home early in the morning, so he was a Des Moines Register zoomer.
Yeah.
Yes. And this was back in the day of, I'm going to forget the name of the guy who started Ragbri, Donald Call. And Donald Call had a column, and he was an advocate of, he loved reading Donald Call's opinion. And so we would discuss that. But then, again, that was when, Walter Cronkite had news on at 6 p.m. or there was Brinkley, somebody in Brinkley. There was two, CBS and NBC were the two stations we would watch for news. And so he would have the news on. Sometimes that was on while we were watching TV. But that was news. It wasn't a 24-hour news cycle.
Right.
You weren't, it wasn't this crazy fill up 24 hours with just whatever you can think of to talk about. It was a half hour of news at dinner time, in the evening, or supper time. So current events were big. And it was very important to him that we were current with current events. So we would watch the news, and then he would go back and he'd say, now, what did you understand about that? Now, what did you understand about that? And do you understand why this person and that person don't get along. And we would do a little history of, perhaps, why John F. Kennedy and LBJ, while they were president and vice president, but actually couldn't stand each other.
Would you describe your father as empathetic?
Yes, I would describe my father as empathetic. Yes, very much so.
Because you at least have to, for empathy, understand the other side and just be aware of why they think the way they do or feel the way that they do.
Yes.
So you can see that seeping through
Absolutely.
the way that he
Yes.
had you guys go through processing the news and different viewpoints.
Yes. He also was adamant that we could do math in our heads. So he would drill us. And I don't remember my sister being drilled as much as me. Yeah. I don't know that she would tell this story in the same way. But it was very important to him. So he would give me math problems. What's 42 times 27? And then I would, figure it out. He said, well, how do you do that? How are you doing the math on that?
What's your method in your head?
What's your method in your head for doing that? So 42 times 27 is 40 times 20, and then 2 times 7, and you add those two together, and that's your answer. And so we were like the students of the first new math. How many new maths have we had since the 70s? But seriously, he thought that was just nonsense. You have to do math in your head.
Why was that so important for him?
I think back in those days, when you were selling hogs or you're selling cattle and people would come and quote to you the price that they would give you for these hogs or those cattle, you had to be able in your head to know, well, my cattle probably weigh close to 1,000 pounds. And if he's giving me so many dollars per pound, he had to be able to figure out in his head on the block whether or not he was going to accept an offer. So I think in selling commodities and selling livestock, farmers had to be able to do math in their heads in order to be quick to respond.
It's so practical.
It was a necessary skill set.
Yeah. And then how about your mom?
Mom, at the dinner table, she would have been more quiet. She would have been busy doing the food.
Really?
She was an incredible cook, an incredible baker. Her cookies and coffee cakes and cinnamon rolls. I don't remember her being in the conversation as much during the meals. Yeah. Yep.
Do you feel that your parents had any expectations about what roles for you to grow into and assume? Whether it's, hey, as the wife, Sue, as a future wife, you should prep for that role that your mom was taking over. But it also sounds like your dad was giving you some practical tools to stand up for yourself and hold your own. How do you think about that?
And very clearly about that. My dad was very, very clear with me that I was to have a college education. He didn't have one. He went to Iowa State for maybe what they used to do, a farm op program, where they would bring farmers up to Ames after graduation from high school for like a semester and just teach them basic business skills in running farm operations. And he went through that course. But he did not have a college education. But he said, you will have a college education because I need to know as a father, you'll always be able to support yourself. You never know when you're going to be on your own. Mm-hmm. Now, graduating from high school in 1973, there were women who went off and did engineering and medicine, but it wasn't common. Typically the girls chose go to school and become a teacher, go to nursing school, or go to AIB and become an administrative assistant. They were the most predominant, not the entirety of, but the predominant choices.
Right.
I didn't have much desire to be a teacher, and I didn't want to be a secretary. But nursing appealed to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and nursing turned out to be a fabulous career because then you can just go in 100 directions.
Yes.
And today that's true as well.
Yeah. What appealed to you, at least from the get-go, about nursing?
From a get-go, I was really attracted to clinical nursing and the opportunity to hands-on, take care of patients. That was very appealing to me. And I did that for 7 years.
Wow.
And then had the opportunity to take a nurse manager role, which, that's a story too.
Please share. Because that was the first time you had a leadership role.
It was.
And had to interact with team members on a different hierarchy or level. Yeah, what was that experience like?
Well, we had relocated to the Omaha Council Bluffs area from Mason City. We lived in Mason City when we were first married. But I wanted to get back closer to Omaha, closer to my parents, and And Dave was in a position, he's an accountant, so his skills are readily transferable. And so.
Just has your mental math as an accountant?
No, he doesn't. No, he does not. No, he still uses the 10 key.
He's so dependent on that.
So dependent on the 10 key, yeah, no. But we moved back to Council Bluffs in Omaha. He had an accounting position in Omaha, and I had worked at Mercy Hospital in Mason City, and I decided, even though they were very different Mercies, but I would apply at Mercy Hospital in Council Bluffs.
As a nurse manager?
No, I wanted to work in the float pool.
Gotcha.
Because I wanted to have an opportunity to float to the various units to decide which unit would be the unit that I fit and
land on.
And then apply for a permanent position there. So I went to work, and I had been there about 3 months, and I get a phone call. I'm 25 years old, okay? And I get a phone call from the director of nursing, and she said, she says, we understand, you've started to work here, and we would like to know if you would ever be interested in having a conversation about this open nurse manager position we have. And I thought, I've only been here 3 months. I haven't really gotten to know anybody because I'm floating every day.
Right.
And I said, well, I don't have any management experience. I'm a staff nurse. And she said, well, yeah, but she said, we've seen some things we really like, and we thought maybe you just might want to come in and visit about this. Well, lo and behold, I went in and I visited, and they made me an offer, and I thought, it's just the beauty of not knowing what you don't know. It's just, and young and being naive and all of that. So I said yes and took the job. It was a 44-bed orthopedic neurosurgical unit with some tough orthopedic surgeons and a really demanding neurosurgeon. But more notably, they had terminated the previous nurse manager. And they had terminated the nurse manager because the physicians were so rough on her and belittling of her. And I think they nearly destroyed the poor lady. Well, and the staff, there was work to do. The staff, there were issues. There was a lot of HR work that needed to be done. So I had a lot of help, I had a lot of support from the lady who hired me and asked me to take the work. And in 6 months, I had turned over 50% of the staff, hired new nurses that were graduating onto this team, and we became the unit that the orthopedic surgeons demanded to have their patients on, but more importantly, that neurosurgeon who was tough became our biggest fan.
How did you break through with that neurosurgeon?
I told him we were going to provide great care to his patients, and we delivered on it. And the staff, we agreed we were going to provide great care to those patients, and we were going to do it. And just created, it helped to have an infusion of a new group of nurses. Mm-hmm. I was able to
train them the way you want to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We introduced a new model of nursing. Back in those days, it was called primary nursing. So it was exciting. It was fun. It was built on accountability and advocacy for patients, which was very motivating to new nurses to be a part of that. And it turned out, as I look back over my career, probably my favorite job.
Wow.
It was awesome.
Wow.
Just awesome.
Sue, I had this story prepared, and I think this is the most appropriate time to share with you because I'm connecting it with how you broke through and connected with that neurosurgeon. When I was in Cedar Rapids, you were in a VP role with our network development. There was a meeting, FNDC. Mm-hmm. And as a fellow, I would keep a Word document of, I titled it Pearls of Wisdom. And it would take things that I learned while I was shadowing all of these different executives and being in these meetings, that someone would say something that I thought to myself, I need to write that down. I need to save that. So Pearls of Wisdom. And I knew I had one in prep for us sitting down and having this conversation. I knew I had you on there for one of my Pearls of Wisdom that I took. And here's what I wrote. So to set the scene here, we had this meeting with regional physicians and leaders expressing a loss of trust because of a decision made at the system. I couldn't tell you what that decision was, but I could tell you the feeling in that room. Lots of tension, they wanted answers. And it must have bubbled up high enough for you to say, you know what, I'm going to drive to Cedar Rapids because I need to be in person to address whatever that decision was that just did not land with these physicians. So I'm in the room here as an early careerist, and I'm feeling the tension in the room, and I'm like, this is awkward. But I know Sue, I know her from a year ago with my internship. I wonder what she's gonna say, how she's gonna say it. And so some bullet points I took. Sue started her response by first identifying what she was hearing and at the root, what was at the root of each complaint. Because the physicians talk first and you just listened, you just let them talk. So when you spoke, the first thing you did was identify what you were hearing and what was at the root of each complaint. Sue then expressed her intent for her visit and an explanation to follow. Sue then went into her story and her background to show that she's on the same side. And then she discussed the context, motivation, and the why behind the decision. After you spoke, those physicians unanimously got on board with you. It was magical.
Oh, wow.
And I don't remember exactly what you said or what the decision was, again, but I wrote this down, and this was several years ago. I still have this Word document that I was able to drum this up. The things that I highlighted there, you know, empathy, we talked about empathy with your father and him instilling with you and your sister at a young age. You got to think about the other side. Why do they think the way that they do? You know, these things that I'm highlighting, what resonates with you with the story?
I think I remember that day.
Really?
I do. And were we in the boardroom?
Yes.
Yeah, I can remember. But I also, the details, the actual context of what called the meeting, I don't remember. But I do remember how the room felt.
Wow.
Yeah, I do remember that. And I wouldn't have remembered anything about how I responded. You know, except to say, I was thinking, if you're going to say, do you remember what you said? You know, in leadership, and it's not always decisions you've made personally. Sometimes it's decisions your team has made. But I think I think it's so important for leaders to get a little vulnerable. You know, we're not perfect. Mistakes are made, bad decisions are made, and admit it. Just admit it. It was a bad decision. And again, I don't remember the context of that particular situation. But at the same time, I think it's important for your team to know you have their back. You know, one of the things that does trouble me is when leaders think they're bigger than the organization they work for. Because the organization is made up of people, individuals. You know, as I look back at UnityPoint Health, and it's changed tremendously in this 2.5 years since I've been done. Many things needed to change. You know, we came out of COVID. That pandemic alone impacted the industry of healthcare in ways that I think 40 years from now we'll be looking back and going, wow.
Yeah.
The transformation of the healthcare industry that we're in the middle of right now, and we haven't even come through yet. So there were things that needed to change. So just suffice it to say, my comments about change are not in resentment at all.
Yes.
I do, however, really, my prayer for UnityPoint Health is that the special nature of UnityPoint Health are the connected relationships between the individual people. And I believe there is something unique in UnityPoint that needs to be remembered and retained. I worry for institutional history with the folks, with the talent that has left, with talent that retires. Some of that will be forgotten because new people come to UnityPoint Health and say, this is different. There's something different here. You know, and you go back in time to the history of how the old Iowa health system came together, and if you really go back into the 2 or 3 gentlemen that pulled it together, it was built on relationships. They happen to be 3 golfers, not to tie back to our golf conversation, but they happen to be 3 good golf buddies that spend a lot of time as healthcare executives on the golf course, talking, thinking, being vulnerable with each other about what could be and what wasn't going well in their own individual community hospitals, and then dreaming about what could be as a system. And so the history of UnityPoint Health comes out of relationships. And I look back at the time I was blessed to spend with the CEOs when we had Ted Thompson and Debbie Simon, Eric Kroll, and Rick Seidler, and that whole crew. And every month we went to Des Moines for 2 days of meetings. But on Thursday night, between our meetings on Thursday and Friday, we had dinner together and we had good conversation together. And that, the relationship and the camaraderie and the spirit that built, that's what I think about. That's the stuff that keeps the spirit alive in the workplace. And I that's my prayer for UnityPoint, is that is retained.
Do you worry on a broader scale outside of UnityPoint, just with COVID, like you were saying, and it's a lot more digitized, tele this, tele that, virtual.
Yeah.
You lose that in-person conversation. Something that I decided on when starting this podcast is I need to have the guests in person. Of course, you can expand your connections and get guests otherwise you wouldn't have been able to because of virtual, but I made a conscious decision early on is I'm having tea with someone right in front of me. And so do you worry about that just as a societal perspective about losing the art of breaking bread together?
Absolutely. Oh, and I think there's so many forces at play that are working against this one-on-one eye contact. I worry about people not knowing how to make eye contact anymore.
Yeah.
We can read on social media all we want or all the screen time, but there's something very real about being able to have a conversation. Now I'm forgetting my source, but I was just reading or hearing there's a college that's now offering a class on small talk.
No.
Because students have lost the art of making small talk. Yes. And again, I'm going to go back and I'll find that.
We can fact check that.
Yeah.
We'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah.
Incredible. That's sad.
It's text. It's, 1-word, 2-word responses and texting and yes.
Yeah.
So if you think what you're doing here is pretty powerful.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder if it would resonate because this art is losing. And so do you have a revamping of, hey, I missed that small talk thing. Yes, it was awkward, and yes, COVID allowed the introverts to have a safe space where they can just have an excuse not to interact. But when does the pendulum, when is the hunger for going back?
The social aspect to work is real. And yes, it contributes to the loss of productivity when you have too much time spent in the coffee room. But if it speaks to the heart, how many problems are solved with your coworkers, and not just work problems, but life problems?
Yeah.
And how do you do that over Teams?
Yeah.
Or Zoom?
Right.
Yeah, not the same.
No.
And then how many people on Zoom are turning their cameras off? It's like, what is happening?
I'm guilty. I am. I totally am.
Not if you're talking.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a risk. There's a big risk there of just losing humanity. Sue, what makes your eyes light up?
My granddaughter.
Ingrid Grace.
Ingrid Grace.
Talk about
Ingrid Grace. She'll be 18 months on the 30th of this month. And it's just a delightful age. And she's just perfect in every way. We're so blessed. She's a lover of books. She loves to have books read to her. She has, I don't know how many books, the poor girl. She loves books. I'm just fascinated by her attention span at 18 months to sit and listen to book after book after book, which of course I love.
Yeah.
Of course, as a grandmother, I'm encouraging of that.
Yeah.
Yes. And so with that, her vocabulary is phenomenal. And she calls me Mormor. Because, I'm mother's mother. Mormor is mother's mother in Danish. My family comes from Denmark.
Yes.
And so I'm Mormor.
And what's Dave?
He's Vampa.
Bumpa?
Bumpa.
Bumpa.
Bumpa and Mormon.
That's so cute.
So yeah, she makes my eyes light up, of course. What else makes my eyes light up? You know, since retirement, two or three things that when I think, I love the fact I wake up every morning and I do what I want to do. I do what I want to do. Today I wanted to come to TIFF and to see you. But we love entertaining, and we live in two places. We have, the lake in the summer and the desert in the winter. And so people like to come and see us, not probably just to see us, but to enjoy the weather where we live.
How do you think about hosting? If you have a gathering, are you and Dave first big on, let's invite for a themed or this kind of dinner or anything special like that? Or is it just have people over?
No, we're more have people over and get in the pontoon and maybe take a bottle of wine and just cruise. And Lake Panorama is a river that was dammed up back in the 70s. So it has many, they call coves, water that goes back into the coves. So it's a beautiful lake for cruising and wine drinking and conversation. So that's our motive of entertaining primarily.
Okay.
Yeah. No, not themed parties and big dinners. No, that's not as much.
Yeah, but just having people over.
Yeah.
And have another shared memory and experience.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
That is special.
Yeah.
That is special. I also know that you are well traveled.
Oh, travel.
And I know that that's something that you really enjoy. So what is about travel that makes your eyes shine?
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm trying to think of where to start with travel. We have had the pleasure of going to France twice with friends on barge cruises. And I don't know if you're familiar with the barge cruise industry. Okay.
Explain to me.
So in the country of France, there's all sorts of canals that were built in the 1400s, 1500s that were used for just transporting goods. And they're off the rivers. I mean, they're fed by rivers, but they're canals, and they're not wide at all. And they're supported by a lock system. So, and there were barges, of course, these old barges that have been purchased by hotel industries and retrofitted to become like 5-star floating hotels. So because they're barges, they accommodate anywhere from a dozen to maybe 20 people at the most. So it's very, very small groups of people, typically groups that will choose to travel together.
Yes.
Which is what we've done twice now. And we've done barge cruising into the Champagne region of France, and we did that in 2017, and then 2019, and then this past summer, this past June, we went into the Burgundy region, which is on the eastern border of France. So we could look over and see the Swiss Alps, and it was amazing.
It's the same group to both locations?
Same.
Who are these friends?
French Country Waterways is the name of the barge company, and our friends are Gary and Donna Hoover, and then other friends that,
Are these just friends that you've had?
And it's friends of friends, so it's kind of you bring your friend, I'll bring my friend, and we get to be friends all together. Yeah, it's that sort of.
Fun. Yeah. All retired.
Oh, yes. Everyone's retired, and we have a private chef, we have a private sommelier and so you get an education on the wines and the food, and every day there's a tour. You'll stop and get off the barge and go either to a winery or there's all sorts of war memorials and World War I, especially in the Champagne region.
Yeah, are you really into history?
I love history.
Yeah, influenced by your dad, you think, at an early age?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
To make the connections of...
Yeah. And my grandfather and grandmother, who were immigrants from Denmark, my grandfather fought as a Dane. He fought in the United States Army for the United States in World War I in France. So I don't know exactly where he was, but to kind of be in that area was very,
special.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Have that own personal.
So then he gained his citizenship by serving in the military, came to Iowa, and bought land, and then brought my grandmother over. She came over through Ellis Island.
Wow. Is Dave a big history buff?
He reads a lot of historical fiction. He likes World War II. And so, of course, we went out to Normandy. We've done the Normandy tour, which must see, must do. Every American should go to Normandy.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I love gaining wisdom from you, and I know mentoring is also an important aspect to who you are. So can you just share a little bit about that passion of yours that you have for mentoring?
Oh, I love mentoring. Selfishly, I think I get more out of it than the person I'm mentoring, because in many ways it keeps me very young. It keeps me, it forces me to stay current with what's happening, whether in whatever industry, the younger person is in. But I just love the stories. I love the challenges. I love getting the phone call. I love getting the text. Do you have time? I have an issue. Would you have a minute? I love those conversations. So, I don't know how else to describe it. I feel like it's very selfish on my part because it keeps me very current.
Yeah.
I feel not very current, not like I could jump back in, but it just keeps me in. I can be conversational.
I have my reasons, but I know we can feel uncomfortable bragging about yourself, but why do you think a large network of younger folks continuously reach out to you specifically?
Yeah, it is uncomfortable, and then, but I'm bragging or whatever you want to call it. I think I'm a good listener. I think I'm honest. And I think they know that I'm not always just going to tell them what they want to hear. I think they know I will be, if there's a tough message they need to hear, I think they know they'll hear it from me. And they already know what the message is. They rarely call that they don't have the answer. Yeah. They have the answer, or they know what needs to happen. But I think it's that I'll be honest.
How do you balance I'm being honest and going to share with this person what they need to hear, not what they want to hear, with tying it back to the earlier concept of give them an A? Because, part of what's give them an A is sometimes you just need to know how valuable you are and how amazing you are. So there is an aspect of, okay, this might not feel like the truth right now, or how do you balance when's the right time to pursue more the give them an A message versus they need to hear this brutal truth?
It's situational. It is situational. And it's variable by the individual in terms of what they can hear. I don't have data to support this statement, but I'm going to say...
I'm sure you have intuition.
My intuition is I always land on the give them an A. I always land on the you've got this in you to do this.
Wow.
That's always a message in that, not maybe those exact words, but in that, with that theme, that you've got it in you. You've got it. And I think even if I've delivered a message that they already knew it, they needed to hear it out loud, it's a good way to land, Wow. I can do this. I've got this in me.
I can't imagine how good it would feel to hear from you, hey, I'm in a dark place, I wanted to talk this out. And you tell me the brutal facts about it, but always ending on, you got this.
Yeah, and the other thing, Joe, it goes so fast. It goes so fast. I mean, when I was reflecting on that job with the orthopedic surgeons and the neurosurgeon, I mean, I can be back at that bedside the day that I met Dr. B. Rossick, and I can remember when Maureen introduced me to him, and she said, oh, this is Sue Thompson, and she's going to be the new nurse manager on 3Med Surg, and she'll do a really good job for you. And he looked at me over those glasses of his, and he said, we will see. And he wasn't smiling. He was not smiling, and I thought, oh boy.
What did I get myself into?
I got myself into. But he's still a dear friend. I made an appointment with him. I wanted him to meet Kate. She was doing her residency at Creighton in Omaha at that time, and so I called him and I said, I have a daughter who's in medical school, she was in residency.
Yeah.
But would you have time for lunch?
Yeah.
And we had lunch together, and it was just wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he's just a dear, dear friend today. But he put me through the drill. I'll tell you what.
This is just a personal curiosity question. because you've been at the top, you've been interim CEO of a large organization, and you've been part of interviews of executives in those roles. What's an interview of a CEO like of a $4 billion organization? What happens at an interview for that position?
Well, they're long, they're exhausting, and it depends on the company, but in most organizations of size, let's just say UnityPoint size or larger, they're long, they're exhausting, and they're exhaustive. I feel sorry for the candidates and what they're put through, and the number of times they have to tell the same stories to different groups, whether it's a group of the senior team, or if it's the board, or if it's a group of medical staff, or a group of community members, whatever. There's a basic subset of information they're repeating over and over and over and over. So it's long, it's exhaustive, and I've thought a lot about that recently in thinking about interviewing. And my conclusion is, interviews are, if you've got the stamina to get through the interview and you can hold it together, you're likely going to get the job. Seriously. But there's so much you don't learn in an interview. Likewise, in calling references. When you give names of people for references, you don't give people that you have worry about what they're going to say. So this whole process of interviewing for executive roles and doing background checks and references, I don't think we've got that nut cracked at all. I don't. Now, so therefore, and in the case of UnityPoint Health, looking back, we did a lot of internal promotion. There was a lot of UnityPoint that was, and I'm using that as my petri dish here.
Right.
However, the individuals who were promoted knew the culture, knew the people, and typically were pretty successful. The unfortunate thing is you don't get the infusion of new thinking in the same way you do if you bring in somebody who's come out of, name that system outside of UnityPoint Health.
Right.
But we're all always interviewing. Every one of us, no matter where we are, what we're doing, we're always interviewing because people are always collecting data points about us. And so I think that's the takeaway for me to you or to any person who's wondering, how do I set myself up for success and promotion in my career trajectory? You're always interviewing. There's people always watching, always collecting data about you and thinking, what do I have, what's going to come open, what is open, where would that person, if I saw something I kind of liked, where could that person fit? And I that's the piece successful people know and embrace.
Wow.
The folks who aren't so successful are the ones who think that they're not on stage. We are always on stage.
Yeah.
We're always on stage. At work, we're always on stage. So remember that.
Do you think about pursuing a board role, either with UnityPoint or a different organization, to still keep a pulse on organizational leadership as a whole, and thinking through those strategies?
I would be interested in a board position in a healthcare organization. Having said that, I jumped into an arena that I know nothing about. I ran for the board of directors of our HOA.
Right.
Like Panorama Association, which is, water quality and roads and running a golf course and a conference. These are not, tax incremental financing for the rural improvement zone. Boy, this was...
What language are they speaking?
Exactly. This is a whole new arena for me. Having said that, while the technical content is new, the basic premises of the relationship between the board of directors and the CEO, how the CEO holds his or her team accountable, that is universal application. And that's where I feel myself being called and drawn into conversations, is succession planning. And how do we think about strategic planning for the organization. So that's the kind of what I say I bring to the table in terms of my own skill set. HR, lots of HR. I have a lot of HR experience. I never ran HR, but I can write a book. Yeah.
Your eyes lit up when you're talking about succession planning and strategizing, and I wonder if there's an aspect of you being able to connect with leaders in an empathetic way, you mentoring, and all of those aspects come together in you having a knack for putting the right people in the right roles in the right places. Does that energize you?
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, and if you would ask me what do you think you're best at, I think I'm either best at connecting people with work that they love or connecting people to the right job. I do. I do think that is a gift I was given. And I can point to a number of people that, I mean, I can look back and say, I had a little something to do with where they are today and how well they've done. So, and that's wonderful. I mean, I love that.
Yeah, I can feel that energy coming from you, that we hit a touch point. Were there examples where there was one leader where they were just in an environment that was just not working out, but you were able to discern, you should go towards this role, and they just thrived? Have there been examples of that?
Or they were in a really tough role. That one's not coming to me real quick. The person I think of is the gal that I groomed to take my job when I left that best job I ever had in the whole wide world, that nurse manager role. And she went on to run information tech. It had nothing to do with, she's a nurse. Again, she was my 3 to 11 charge nurse. But she became the nurse manager when I left that clinical role. And we had 2 children, and I needed to do something that would give me a little more time at home for a bit. But she went on to hold an information technology leader role within a large Catholic health system. So that is very cool. The other person who also comes to mind is a gal that she also was a staff nurse. And I pulled her into work with me in Joint Commission, which at that time, before DNV, was the accrediting body. And Sue and I worked together to get Fort Dodge through an accrediting process back when we were both, like coordinators of quality assurance kinds of positions. And she has gone on, she's now the vice president of quality and performance improvement for HCA down in Jacksonville, Florida, I think. But she has, I know she's a vice president, I know she works for HCA, and I know it's related to quality. I may not have the quality and patient safety thing quite right, but I still hear from her, and she'll still say, thanks for recognizing I had a little something to me. She's got a big job today.
Yeah,
huge.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought about executive coaching?
I did when I first retired, and then I got busy.
You're going to France.
Going to France. I got to get the house ready in California. Yeah. But I would enjoy that. Yeah, I would enjoy executive coaching.
Yeah.
And maybe kind of the house is done now in California, and
so that might be a next chapter here in retirement.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that is certainly a skill set, to have discernment, to understand people's strengths and where they thrive.
Yeah.
Not everyone can do that.
Yeah.
Let alone yourself having the self-awareness of, like Nathan had, in his in college. I'm not in the right place. Not many people have that own self-awareness or the courage to make the move.
Yeah, and the courage to say, I hope I'm not going to let you down, Mom, but, even though you always thought I was this great math and science student, and maybe I'm okay, I do that stuff, but that's not what makes my eyes shine. Just because you can do something doesn't mean it makes your eyes shine.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Sue, what is your most important daily habit?
I'm really, I have a new calendar. It's on intention. And so I've been thinking intentionally how to stay in constant prayer. A lot of folks, and I have a good friend, and we talk about getting up and either doing morning devotions or getting our Bible study work done, or, kind of hit the ground with Bible study. And where my intentions are at this point in time, is how to stay in constant prayer, how to stay in constant conversation with God, how to just build prayer into just how your mind. And when I can do that, there's just such a sense of not only comfort, but confidence. And even though you get yourself in maybe a little bit of an awkward situation in a conversation, he's going to be there, to give me the words or tell me to be quiet for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's an intention I'm really working on.
Yeah, and however long you've had this faith, I just want to ask, because here we've talked about the highlights of your life and where you ended your career in a top position for a large organization. Could you share with me some of the most challenging, darkest times?
I have been really blessed. Our children were healthy. I have a wonderful husband who could not have been more supportive in raising 2 kids when I had a busy career. And he had a busy career too, but he lived in Webster City where the kids were going to school and I was driving to Fort Dodge, which is a half-hour away. But nevertheless, the issues of running to the doctor, getting school physicals, and all the things. I've been blessed with a wonderful husband. My parents were healthy. They lived into their 80s. Perhaps if I think of some of the most challenging times, when my mother, she was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and chose not to pursue treatment. She was 83. My mother worked as an environmental services employee at the nursing home in my hometown of Elkhorn until she was 80. She loved to clean. She loved her job. She worked 2 days a week, but it gave her something to do.
Wow.
She was a fabulous housekeeper. I told you she's a domestic engineer.
Yes.
And she loved to work, and she worked in that role. She got to the point where she was taking care of her friends who were now residents of the home. So she was cleaning the rooms of her good friends, and she felt a big responsibility to look after them. So she finally retired when she turned 80. And then she was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. My mother was also fastidious about her appearance. She was fastidious about her health and her weight and her cholesterol and her blood pressure and all the things. And for her to be the one to get pancreatic cancer was like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? But she did. But she chose not to. She didn't want to have the surgery. She said, I am good to go. I am, my faith is intact. But she decided to move close to us and live at Lakeside Village, which was an independent living community at that time, because she was still driving her car and living well when she was diagnosed. Once she got her pain under control, she was living well. So she moved into Lakeside Village, and she said she felt like she was on vacation every day. She was in hospice services, but she was driving, to Des Moines, to Carroll, shopping. She loved clothes. She was buying herself new clothes. But then, that went on for about 4 or 5 months. But then the cancer started to take a toll, and she went downhill pretty progressively. So for those last 3 months, my sister and I were staying with her to allow her to be able to stay in that setting. And those were tough. That was tough stuff, taking care of Mom there at the end. We managed her pain very well. Hospice did a wonderful job. But yeah, that was a tough time. That was because she was a wonderful mother. Yeah.
Yeah. And seeing her in that state too.
Yeah, and just
because
absolutely.
she's always
absolutely
looking her best and
absolutely.
Yeah.
The other this is a story I haven't told this story very often, but for whatever reason it came to my mind when you said a dark time. I didn't know when I was growing up that my parents struggled. Farming was tough, and my dad was a farmer in Southwest Iowa. It was not always easy. And one Christmas, I received a birthstone. It was my birthstone. This is stone that I wear. It's this red stone. And it was in a very different setting then. But I was probably 13 or 14 years old. But I wanted my birthstone for Christmas, and I received this ring. And so I went to school after the first of the year, and everybody's, what did you get for Christmas? Well, what did you get for Christmas? And so one of my friends said, well, what did you get? And I got this birthstone. And she said, well, what else? And I said, this is what I got. I got my birthstone. And she said, that's all you got for Christmas? What? And I was just like, what in the world? I was just heartbroken. And until that point in time, it hadn't occurred to me that I should have gotten more.
Right.
But I went home, and I remember I'm standing by my mother drying dishes at the sink. And I said, Mom, you know, my friend asked me what I got for Christmas. And I told her, and she told me that wasn't enough. And my mother started to cry. I will never forget this. She started to cry. And she said, Susan, this has been a tough year. And it was everything we had to give you your birthstone. And I can, to this point in this day, remember how horrible I felt, breaking my mother's heart. I mean, I was like, what do you mean? It was a very set of conflicted emotional reactions. I mean, here I am wanting to respond to this friend, and yet here I've broken my mother's heart. So years went by, and this stone sat in a very old-fashioned setting, but I thought, it's a beautiful stone. So I had it reset, and I wear it, and I have the diamond of my grandmother on the one side, and the diamond of Aunt Ingrid, the namesake for our granddaughter, on the other, and I had it made, and it just reminds me of the humble nature of my parents and from where I came. And I remember that, and that's just very important to me. But I haven't told that story very often.
That's beautiful. I'm so glad you did share that. Yeah, it's an integral part of your beginnings and who you are.
Absolutely.
And, yeah, never forgetting that.
And then, yeah.
Wow. Thank you, Sue.
Yeah.
Huh. Advice you'd give your younger self?
I would tell my younger self to know it goes so fast. It goes so fast. And you're going to get through it. As tough as it seems, you're going to get through it. But enjoy it along the way. Savor it, because it goes fast. And probably just really treasure those relationships. Take care of them. Guard them.
I totally need that. I think where I'm at, you know, I'm early 30s, have a son, have a daughter on the way, kind of in the thick of it, you know, and I share with you that something I've been trying to grow in recently is just contentment. I think I struggle with discontentment, and part of it I think is inherent to my ambition and my self-drive, and it can, in the ugly form, manifest itself in envy. Where's this other person that's my peer in their career? So I've just been reflecting recently just on the need to grow with contentment. And it's busy time with family and establishing yourself, and both in family and your role, my role as husband and father, and then in the career too. And it's easy to see others and compare. And I know they say that comparison is the thief of joy. For sure it is. But to hear you say it goes by so fast brings me perspective, brings me back to realizing those things that I'm worrying about, when I'm where you're at, am I going to really think about that? Am I going to really care?
Yeah. The other thing I would tell myself, and I will tell you, God has a plan. He knows the plan. And enjoy that. Enjoy that.
Yeah.
And just enjoy the confidence of knowing He's got this. He's got you. And it is going to blow you away when you look back and say, wow, wow.
Yeah, I'm just sitting in that because it's needed. It's needed for sure. So thank you, Sue.
Oh, thank you. Oh my. Pleasure is all mine.
Well, I do have some kind of starting to land the plane here in our conversation. I want to know from you book and resource recommendations.
Well, and I'm going to give it. I was going to give you my copy, and then I thought, no, I'm going to send you a fresh copy. But it's. Are you familiar with Jackie Hill Perry?
Yes.
Are you?
I am.
I recently did a Bible study that she was a part of, When You Pray. I don't know if you're familiar with the When You Pray Bible study. There's about a half a dozen women that do lectures, and it's the various. It starts with the Lord's Prayer, then it's, all the different kinds of prayers, and there's a study that goes with each of them. And she does one of those chapters. So I was introduced to her story, which I think is a fascinating story. And my daughter just introduced me to a book, and it's a devotional book. And the thing I loved is that in her preface to her book that she writes, her first sentence is, and I think I'm going to get this pretty close, devotional books were never my cup of tea. And I thought, yes, this is, I love her devotional book, but I was looking at it this morning, and I thought, I've got to send this to Joe. I'll send it to you.
Please.
Yeah. But then she does I think it's a 60-day devotional book, if I'm working my way through it. But I will send it to you. It's wonderful. But she does one on the Christmas story, but she ties it to creation. And her messages, and I won't get this as eloquent as Jackie Hill Perry, but the essence of it is that in the beginning God created perfection, and Adam and Eve lived in the Garden of Eden, and they were in close, intimate relationship with God. They could see God. They lived with God. But then sin came, and sin separated them from God, and no longer were they in an intimate relationship. There was a separation. Between sin separates us from God. Okay. And centuries and centuries and centuries go by, and man never sees God again until the birth of Jesus, when Mary, the mother, gives birth to God and man, Jesus the baby, and she holds God in her arms.
Yeah.
And then just that story, it's Christmas, it's a baby. It just touched my heart when actually my daughter and I were having this conversation. And so this morning I thought, I should give him my copy. Then I thought, I'll send you a fresh copy and I'll write a note in the front.
Can you sign it, please?
I will.
Awesome. Can't wait. How about favorite quotes?
Oh, favorite quote. What's your favorite quote? Inspire me.
One of them is, they attribute it to an African proverb, so I don't know if there's an individual that gets the credit for this, but if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
Oh.
And I love that because I really resonate with collaboration and team, and you could accomplish things you can never accomplish just on your own. And yes, it's easier, it's quicker to just do it your own way, do it the way you want it to get done. But if you want to go far, you need to get a team bought in to the vision. And yes, it's going to be messier. And it's not the shortcut way to do it. But it's the sustaining, and it's you can only achieve that level if you do it together.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Yeah. If you can't think of any, that's okay.
Nothing's coming to mind.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. This is the last segment of rapid fire questions.
Oh.
Okay. So one sentence, couple sentences.
Okay.
All right. What is something people often get wrong about you?
Oh. I think people get wrong about me. It was my political affiliation.
Oh.
And I'll just leave it at that. Yeah.
Write it in the Jackie Hill Perry.
Yeah, okay.
For me. What is one piece of leadership advice you've been given that's so remarkable?
One piece, this is leadership advice or not career advice?
How about either one?
Okay. A piece of career advice was given to me in a taxi cab. I was at a conference in St. Louis on nursing quality assurance. And whoever the faculty person was, whose name I have forgotten, but in the day, she was a very formidable nurse in the arena of quality assurance. And we happened to take the same taxi back to the airport. And she asked me what I was doing. And I had recently accepted a position in nursing quality assurance. And she looked at me and she said, "You will do much more than that someday." I will never forget that. And I thought, who are you? And why are you, you don't know me. But she did. She looked at me and she said, "You will do much more than that someday." And that, I have thought back to that moment so many times when opportunities have been presented and thought, she told me I would do much more than this. I think I should say yes.
She gave you an A, Sue.
She did. She gave me an A in the taxi cab. Yeah.
Amazing.
And here she was. She was a nursing QA guru.
Right.
But anyway, yeah.
Wow.
She gave me an A.
But here you are in that same stature of, someone of that level speaking those words to you.
It was powerful.
And then your position now from where you are with your career and now in retirement of doing the same thing.
Powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. It comes full circle.
Powerful. It does.
What is your best leadership quality?
I think I see the best in people. I can see, whether you call it issues or trouble, or I hate deficiencies, but I can see those things, but it's not what I look for. I do believe my best quality is I do look for the best in people. And then, take what comes, goes with it. And I think another kind of leader, this is maybe my best leadership advice, is I will trust you to the end of the earth until you give me reason not to. And my husband and I use that with our kids. We will trust you. We will trust you to do the right thing, to make good decisions until you give us a reason not to. Mm-hmm. But enjoy the trust.
Yeah, it's a privilege.
Mm-hmm. And people live into that.
Yeah.
People will live into that.
Yeah. Wow. What is one thing you're really excited about right now?
I'm excited for our trip in June. We're going to go to Norway and Denmark. This is our second trip to Denmark, and we'll see family there again, which I'm really looking forward to. But I'm excited to see Norway. We've never traveled the fjords, and my husband's family was from Norway, and we were going to have done that trip in 2020. It was going to have been my retirement. Ta-da! But all the cruise stuff got canceled in 2020, so we finally rescheduled it for this coming summer.
Yeah, Emily has Norwegian roots too.
Does she?
So we say that. So my parents are from South Korea, as I explained. So we say that our kids are Norwegian babies.
That's good. That's good.
Tell me one thing you're deeply grateful for right now.
Well, in this moment, I'm really grateful that you and I met. And this is no accident.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very grateful for that.
Likewise. Yeah. These last couple, I'm going to speak a beginning of a sentence and you're going to finish the sentence.
Oh, okay.
It all comes down to.
It all comes down to a relationship with Jesus Christ.
Pressure comes from.
Within your head.
Are you a rule breaker or rule follower?
Oh, that's a hard one. Would I rather ask for permission than forgiveness? I am a rule follower.
You say that with such.
Well, I used to be a rule breaker. I think I used to be a rule breaker. With age, I think I have. Yeah, I do. I do think I have become less risk-taking. Yes.
Wow.
I think when I was in my prime, I was a rule breaker, but less so. My context for answering that question right now is very much related to a situation going on within our church.
Gotcha.
And it has to do with wanting to be very supportive of our leader on some big decisions that are going on. In my old life,
You would knock down walls.
I would have said, knock down walls, exactly. Yeah. But now I'm understanding the importance of being not submissive, but in not always creating trouble. That's what that reaction's all about.
I love it. All right, this last one. Finish the sentence. I am
really very peaceful at this moment. This has just been such a good time. And I'm very peace-filled. I'm very peace-filled in this moment with my family and life in general. So, yeah.
Wow. I think this is a good place to wrap up. Sue, first of all, thank you for recommending The Art of Possibility to me several years ago, and for coming on as a guest and for all your support. I'm just so thankful for you and our relationship and how quickly you could just see right through me with your amazing listening skills, recommending that book. Something you saw in me, knew that I would resonate deeply with that and all the concepts in The Art of Possibility, and planted seeds for today's conversation, which has been such a joy, so thank you. Any final thoughts or things you'd like to say?
I am so thrilled for you. I love what you're doing here. I want to do anything and everything I can to encourage you and just see you to success, whatever that may be.
I appreciate
But enjoy it along the way.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Such good words. If you want to connect with Sue, her email address is mistymocha@gmail.com.
2 Siamese kittens.
Ask the background folks for that. She's also on LinkedIn, so you can find her there as well. Thank you for tuning in.